Hello, PHPers, and welcome to Week 6. Let's talk a little bit about SQL. Now, you've probably seen or played with the PHP files in Week 5 that had you work with the students table in the CTEC 127 underscore lab 6 database itself. Okay? But I want to show you, just a couple things. I'm purposely going over here, and some things are things that you asked. And let me show you the first thing, and that is from Microsoft Windows. And I'm in Windows 10 here. I have XAMPP running. I have Apache and MySQL, loaded and running. And I'm going to go here to the magnifying glass. I'm going to type in CMD to get to the command prompt, and I am going to navigate my way to the root of the C drive, and then I'm going to say cd XAMPP, which is XAMPP. Then I'm going to go cd MySQL, and then cd bin. Okay, in here I can type MySQL -user root. And if you had a password, you'd also have another parameter for password, but you all don't have that right now. And what I can do here is I can get to a command line version of MySQL. Okay, it's different on the Mac. I'm not going to go there right now, but now if I do something like show databases, semicolon, it lists to me all the databases in here. Bruce, Clarkbook, CTEC 127 underscore lab 6. Right? And then I can say use CTEC 127 underscore lab 6 semicolon. And if I go, if I do something like this now, select star from students semicolon, it shows me all of the data that's inside, right? Inside the students table. And what if I do something like this? Show columns from students. You can see now, I can see the columns, right? The database columns that we defined last week in lab number 6, right? You can see the first name is a variable character, and it's got a width of 20, and no null values are allowed to be inserted in that column. Same with last name, email, right? The student ID, right, happens to be our primary key, and it can't be null. And the phone number is varchar 20. Okay, so just know, right, that you can do database commands from the command line. You'll probably most likely be doing it from PHP or phpMyAdmin, but somebody asked how you can access the MySQL command line, and here it is, right? Then I can do something like this. Create, let me go back here. Let's say, let's do this. Create table, I don't know, test, right? And it's saying here, a table must have at least one column. So I'm going to cover how to do that in the video here, but just know you can do things through the command line rather than having to do them through phpMyAdmin. So let me go back to my slides. Let me go back to my slides here, and here we are. So in this slide deck, which is available in Canvas Week 6, we're going to talk about creating databases and tables, inserting records, selecting data, using conditionals, and using functions. Okay, that's going to be MySQL functions and not PHP functions. So let's go on to the next slide here, and let's talk about creating databases and tables. Now, this is SQL, and the words highlighted are the keywords in SQL that you can use to create a database, right? So if I go back to my command line here and I say, right, create, I'll do it in all caps, it's a little easier, create database, let's call it CTEC, just like that, semicolon. And it created a database. And if I say show databases, right, semicolon, it lists, and you can see now we have CTEC here as a database. And if I did go back to phpMyAdmin right here, and I refreshed the database table here, right? Oh, there it is, refresh. You could see now we have the CTEC database, which has no tables inside of it. Going back to our, what do you call this thing? Our slide deck, our presentation. Okay, so create database and database name. We can do the same with create table, and we give it a table name, and then a parenthesis, and then the column name and a description, column name, description, column name, description. And I'll show you that in more detail shortly. And the description is going to be, what column type you want it to be. Text, varchar, numeric, etc. And let's see. So create database site name and then use site name. So we just did that before. Create database site name and then we can say use site name. So let me do that. Let me just show it to you. Site name is just, what we're doing here. So we're going to say create database site name. And then I could say use site name. And now I am in that database site name. And if I did show tables, how many tables do you think are in site name right now? Absolutely none, because we just created a new database and we have not created any tables. Carrying on here, let's go back. I know there's a hotkey to get back here, but let's do this. So next, if we wanted to manually create a table called users, right? We can type all this in at the command line. We can say create table users, and then we want a field, a column name called user underscore ID, a medium-sized integer, unsigned, right? That means only positive numbers, and it's not null. We don't want empty values to be put in there. And we want that ID to auto increment. So it'll start at 0 and then go 1, 2, 3. And that's something the database engine does for us. It auto increments, right, that field, that number, that medium integer. And then we have a first name column, which has variable characters up to 20. And again, that's not allowed to be null. Last name, varchar, 40 characters, again, not null. And when we say not null, we're not going to allow a user to enter data using a SQL command, insert, that doesn't have the proper fields that we're expecting. So the database engine, right, is going to reject, right, the insertion of data if these fields are null. Okay, so we're saying they can't be null. Okay, email, varchar 60, variable characters, 60 characters, not null. Password, character, 40, not null. And then registration underscore date happens to be of type date time and not null. And the primary key is user ID. That means the key that we're going to use, right, to look up data, the thing that's going to have unique values is the user ID. Okay? Next. Create databases and tables. I showed you this earlier. Show tables, right, from the MySQL command line. And show columns. Again, I showed you this already. It will list the columns and their data types. Inserting records into a table. Now, hear me out again. You can do this from the command line, but we're going to be doing it from PHP. And we're going to be calling, some SQL that has data, say, from a form or other source, and inserting it into a particular table. Now, insert into are the SQL keywords. Table name is going to be the name of the database table that we're putting it into. Column 1 happens to be the the column name that you're going to be putting it into. So you can list column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, etc. No quotes, right? No quotes around those column names. And then values, and then you can put in the values that you want to insert corresponding with those columns specified in the first set of parentheses, right? Okay, got it? So the next one below is just kind of showing the same thing. Okay, so next. To insert data into a table, and here is, say, an example for users. the SQL would be insert into users, and then the column names, first name, last name, email, password, registration date, values, and then Bruce for the first name, Elgort for the second name. There's my email address. And then there's this function called SHA-2. Then it's going to do something with that. It's going to, use some encryption that you'll learn about soon. And then it's going to use another function called now, which happens to be the date and time, right? So look at registration underscore date. The now function is going to return, right, the date time that's currently on the server. Next, quote in queries. In every SQL command, numeric values should not be quoted. So if you're inserting an age of 53, when you build your insert statement, right, you're just going to put 53 in the values area without quotes around it. However, you will put quotes around strings. Date and time values must always be quoted. Functions cannot be quoted, and I think you saw that before, the word now with open and close parentheses. Go back, rewind a little bit. And the word null, right, must not be quoted. To PHP function, SHA-2, used to encrypt hashed data such as passwords, one way and cannot be undone. We'll get into that, not so much this week so much, but probably next week. And now, used to populate a date and time in a timestamp column. Okay. Examples. Here's one. Insert into users values null, Bruce, Elgort, Belgort, SHA-2, Fluffy, encrypted at 512, and the function now. Now, note the use of sh2 and now, both functions. Okay, they're both functions that you can use within MySQL and most versions of SQL to do certain things. Notice that that first column has a value of null. A value of null. Null is actually different than an empty string. Null is null, okay? So selecting data, and you may have seen this from the work you've done in week 5, and maybe you've already watched the other videos in week 6 about selecting data. How do you retrieve data from a database, right? The select keyword is your friend, and so am I. The most widely used SQL keyword. Select which columns you want, separated by columns, from which table. And I know some of you are thinking, and asking what happens when you have multiple tables, and we'll get into that. We're just, we're just starting here. The simplest select query is select star, which means all columns from a given table name. Got it? So you can select specific columns, maybe first name and last name only, from a specific table name, and you separate those columns in the select by commas. Again, remember, no quotes around those column names. Okay? So when we do asterisk, it gets all columns, and if you only want one column or 5 columns, you specify the column names. Okay? Using conditionals, check this out, right? Select the columns you want from the table you want where one or more conditions are true. So let me give you some examples. Select name from people where the birth underscore date equals that date, 1/24/2013. That'll give you all the records from the people table that match that condition. Now, where is a SQL keyword, and that's going to say where this condition is true. Next, select star from cities where zip code in, right, 90210 or 90211. So it's either the first or the second in that set. Okay? So it says see list of MySQL operators on page 140 of textbook. You could ignore that because that's from an older book. But you can go to a link that I have in Canvas and you'll be able to see all of that stuff. Using conditionals continued. Select all columns, that's the asterisk, from users where email is null, right? Where there's no email. Got it? Select star from users where email equals blank, right? A blank string, not null, right? these two statements are not equivalent. Null is not equal to empty string. Okay? Consider this. Select star from users where pass equals sh2 fluffy, comma 512. What that's going to do, right, is given the password fluffy, right, it's going to encrypt that and try to find that encrypted value in the users table. Okay? Pretty neat stuff. So when we talk about like login forms and stuff like that, that's how we're going to determine if the password that the user entered was the password that they registered with, right? So all three of these statements do the same thing. Select first name, comma last name from users where user ID is less than 10 or user ID is greater than 20. And again, that's going to select all the records, and it's going to return you first name and last name, right, from the row of data in the table, from the user's table where the user ID is less than 10 or the user ID is greater than 20. The next statement, select first name, last name from users where not between 10 and 20. How about that? And then select first name, last name from users where not in the set 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Pretty neat stuff, okay? So it's going to, again, you can build your select statements in many different ways, the same way you can build your code in many different ways. So that's all I got for the first section. What I would do, and by the way, yeah, I showed you this already, right? So it says MariaDB, and just know that MariaDB is a variant of MySQL, and that's what XAMPP works with right now. Let's just try something here. Let's go use CTEC what is it? CTEC. I forgot. So let's just say show databases semicolon, and let's say use CTEC 127 lab 6 semicolon, and then let's say select star from students, that's the table name, where let's say email, I'll do email equals quote blgort@clark.edu semicolon, and there's one row of data. Okay. Now I'm doing this from the command line, but I just want to show you that you know, you could do these sorts of things. And then again, you asked about this stuff. Okay. I'll probably create a second video on how to do it from a Mac. So again, I covered a lot in this video. I probably should have had this video in week 5, but there was a lot going on in week 5. So again, watch it again, and I will put some resources in the reading section of Module 6 so you can go over them. Okay? So the code word, if you watch this entire video, is going to be penguin. Penguin. So if you've watched this video and gotten this far, Slack me the code word penguin for some brownie points.